Okay. Oh, it says starting in 5 minutes. Okay.
Okay, so Diana, a lot of people were confused about the registration and getting online, so we should just go over that afterwards for next week. Diana just sent me, good morning, Peter, can you send me please the ID? So
I sent everyone the ID. And you
yeah, I know.
I think what has happened in the letter I wrote to everyone, this ID, but they might not have, and I copied again what Derek had sent you. So I don't know. Some people have. I got some letters from different parts of the world.
Once you get it on email, there's no need for an ID actually.
Yeah, I know. I don't know that she means that. She just might mean the link. But let me.
Have you let Johan has come? We'll admit him, and we'll quickly run through what we're doing. Derek, are you watching?
Yes,
Where is Derek?
Yeah. I just started the YouTube live, and in fact, I've put the link into the chat box, so you can circulate that to others as well. Then, in case someone is having a problem. Otherwise, I'm opening. I'm admitting Javier.
Yeah,
and I'm also opening up the waiting room. So
wait 1 moment. I will just.
Okay, I'm waiting.
Again, we've had this problem of screen saving. Someone is screen. Why is that, Derek? Can you see my thing is? Are you also seeing the same thing?
No. Hong Sing something. One second.
Started. Now it's okay. Something is happening. Just happened last time too.
No, we have to tell someone. Don't.
Yes, my dear, we're waiting for
but
you.
No one else should be able to screen share.
No, it's actually there one participant, but yeah.
Then you get the email with a link, and you click that. You don't need an ID.
Oh, good.
Javier is here and Johan is here.
Hello. Johan, I was trying to get how to help me to how to pronounce your German Jewish name. Johan, is it?
Johan, yes. Yes, it's supposedly not Jewish, but I don't know. You never know in Germany.
So I was just trying to practice before you came. And Javier, we have got welcome from Mexico. Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah, very nice.
Nice to meet you.
I'm delighted.
Can I interrupt? May I interrupt just for a second because I'm trying to help Diana get on. She says she's being asked for the ID, but nobody else has been asked for this, right? So I don't have.
You know the ID. There is an ID,
second.
no? We'll give it to.
Yeah, I'll just.
No one else but ask that. I don't know why that's.
Derek, can you send that to her or figure it out?
I'm just putting it in the chat box, Peter.
But how will she won't be
able to see it?
No, Peter can just message it to her if you don't mind, because I don't have a contact. Or if you want, I can send it to her on email.
That would be good.
Okay. You said Diana?
Diana Getzman.
Diana, I'll do that.
Thank you. It's weird that she's being asked for that. I don't know.
All right. Before we go, let's quickly introduce, because you're all going to be. I'm just checking to see who is anyone else before I. Again, she's come back. Amrita Clements is back there.
There may be net issues, I think.
Yeah, connectivity.
Do you want to let her in?
Me?
Okay. All right. Let's. Derek, are you letting Amrita in?
Yeah, just a minute.
I hear everybody very well.
Okay, very good. Let's quickly, before we open it.
Yeah, Amrita's in. Good.
So here we are with all of you. We have Wai Yung from Hong Kong, here from London. Peter, of course, you know, all of you know Peter, because Saliha from New York. Is that right? Johan from Heidelberg. Javier from Mexico, and then we have two. We have Bernice Wall and June Lee. Is that right? Who's Bernice? This is Bernice, isn't it?
And Lucy.
Yeah, that's Bernice and June Lee. They are both family. They are going to be family members in our panel. We've got four. Two of them from Hong Kong, and then we have Deepak. Deepak is professor. He's a pathologist. So we're going to have different types of family members. And there's one more, Leanne, who's a clinical audiologist in a COVID hospital. Yeah, Derek, can you let Leanne in? She says she's
just
waiting.
a minute. I'll open the waiting room.
No, I want to just tell them before we do that, and we can open it after that.
Okay, just a minute.
Well, I can't find her. Okay, yeah, I just saw it.
You got? Okay.
No, I just saw it. Where is here. Oh, Jesus. And the other is, of course, Des Cahill, Professor Des Cahill, who's who's using, who's writing the summary. He'll be summarizing this. All right. So basically, what we're going to do, just I'm going to welcome everyone, and the distinguished panel, and after that, Dr. Mary will also welcome on behalf of the Department of Education and so forth. Then we will introduce very quickly all our panelists today, all for both days, and ultimately I'm going to give the honor of setting the scene to Peter. I've discussed that. Normally I do that, but as the co-convener, I've asked Peter to do that part today. Okay? And so we have, so just for all of you here, so once again, we have here from, I'm very delighted. We have Javier and Eva, I think both of you are from the UK, from the Royal College. Is that right? Both are psychiatrists from you. Am I right, Javier?
Yes, you're right.
Are you? Yeah, I thought, I know you're in Mexico, but
Yes,
I think you have you're with the Royal College. Yeah, I'm from Australia.
Okay.
There are three of us are the. I don't know how many more are there, but anyhow. So we have four. Just for all the the panelists to know here, we have four panelists. Two. June Lee and Bernice Wall from they're representing families, but from different countries and with different types of challenges. The other is Deepak, who's associate professor of pathology, and we have again, this has happened, Derek. Leanne Mendes, who's a clinical physiologist at one of the major COVID hospitals in Melbourne. Okay, so we shall now open and we shall start program.
Yeah, just a minute.
Okay, you can open that and I'll go ahead. So thank you all for coming and joining us.
We'll just wait. We'll have to wait, Dr. Russell. Just let them all join.
Let them all come in, and you'll have to start your recording also, both of you.
Yeah, I've started my recording. Dr. Russell can do it as well.
Okay. So tell me when everyone's in so we can welcome them.
Yeah, they're just about joining.
There's JS has also joined us. So we have.
Afternoon, everyone. Evening, morning.
Yes.
Yes.
Good to see you.
Dr. JS is a part of our with Timothy, part of the committee from London. He's from Manchester.
Hi, Dr. JS.
Hello, Mary. How are you?
Good.
Are we ready to go?
Okay.
Ready to go.
All right. Derek, okay.
Yes, I think we can go.
All right. Very well. A big welcome to all distinguished panelists. We have an outstanding group of panelists from around the world. I'm delighted. We had, as you know, we finished the 12 and we started the 13th and 14th is now dedicated to the families and to couples, right? Looking at what's happening in terms of the effect of lockdown, quarantine, and the COVID experience that all of us around the world are together combating or responding, and hopefully, and in solidarity, we will come back successful in the end. Again, Derek, we've had this happen again.
I think you'll have to send a personal request to the person. Not
Shaozing Lu, can you stop your screen sharing, please?
Yes.
Shaozing Lu.
But why is it happening?
Diana is here. There's Diana Kissman. She made it.
I am.
Hello, Diana.
There
Yes.
she is. Okay, great.
Okay,
All right,
all right. I think, yes. Now it should be fine. Yeah.
Okay, so there we are, and I just so welcome to all our very distinguished panel from around the world. We are delighted and really happy to have the UNESCO chair in bioethics holds this as part of our Article 13 of the Universal Declaration on Bioethics and Human Rights, that solidarity and cooperation. And indeed, we have endeavored and have successfully been doing this for the last 12, and we continue to the 13 and 14 of our webinar program that will focus on beautifully on this understanding the different aspects of what we all are facing in terms of the pandemic. So I want to welcome the participants. We have a large number of participants from many parts, certainly from the UNESCO chair, it's 58 countries or 56 countries, but along with all our distinguished panelists, we will have more from other countries joining. But I think virtually the UNESCO chair's program covers 58 countries along in all the continents. So that's a great program by itself. So I'm now going to ask the co-chair here, Professor Mary Matthew, from the head of the Indian program, but also from the education department, to welcome.
All right, so good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all our participants, and especially our panelists for today, especially the family members. This is on behalf of the education department of the International Network of the UNESCO Chair in Bioethics, Haifa. And we have a very, good program for you today, because this is something that everyone has been asking, and all our participants in the previous webinars have been asking about what about families, what about couples, how do we deal how do we deal with the issues that they confront. So today's webinar is the 13th webinar, and we have a lot of panelists. So we may not be able to cover everything today. So we are going to divide this into 2 sessions. And in these 2 sessions, we will have 2 family members for this session. That is Dr. Deepak and Mrs. June, and Mrs. Leanne and Mrs. Bernice will take part in the next session. But we will introduce all the panelists today. And the next week, everyone can also join in, those who have already taken part. So a few ground rules before we start. I request all the participants to please switch off your videos and to mute your mics, because it causes a lot of disturbance other than the panelists. Panelists, please stay on with your videos on. And if you like, you can mute your mic, but when you are called to speak, please switch on your mics. So thank you for that. And to all the participants, if you have any questions, please put it in the chat box and we shall try to answer it. The panelists also can answer to the questions in the chat box. So thank you all. And I will ask Dr. Derek to give the house rules before we start. Dr. Derek?
Yes, good morning, good evening, and welcome to each and every one of you. Very grateful to have such a distinguished panel, and thank you all for taking the time to be here. There's a lot of excitement in the background. I know the topics. So we'll be giving you a chance to speak and introduce the topic and give us your views in the beginning. And when you are asked a question, I will unmute you, so you will get a chance to speak. You have a choice of keeping your video on or off for the rest of the time. And to all the other participants, may I request you to kindly mute yourselves and keep your video off so that we don't have a problem with the bandwidth or the streaming. In addition, if y'all notice, I have put a YouTube link into the chat box. That is the live streaming of this meeting as well. So in case there is anyone else whom you feel would like to join this meeting and is having difficulty, you can just forward them that YouTube link and they will be able to watch it on whichever device they are on. So I think we'll have maximum participation for that. And Peter, you can also just maybe forward that to anyone on the West Coast who may need it, so they can join wherever, you know, they'll get the link continuously till the meeting is on. And it will automatically be recorded to YouTube, so they have an opportunity of joining even if they don't want to log into this particular meeting. In case anyone has any issues, kindly put it in the chat box again. We'll try and solve it. Back to you, Dr. Mary. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right,
And
so
I think Dr. Russell will take over now.
okay, thank you both.
And actually, if I may interrupt, Dr. Russell, Dr. Basagalupe is on, but he's several screens back somehow. So he's one of our panelists.
If you can, okay, just a minute.
I don't know how to bring him. I mean, you would have to bring him forward, but he's there.
All right. So while you do that, I might welcome to all to Dr. Gonzalo, who I think will be brought in here. Let me thank Dr. Mary and Dr. Derek. Now, this series has been an important part of the UNESCO Education Department of the UNESCO Chair in Bioethics program. I head the Department of the Education Department, which is part of the international program. And we've had some excellent meetings, webinars. The last two were, and it sort of flows so well because the last two focused on the effect on schools and then on universities. So we had school students from 4 countries who actually expressed and spoke along with the principals. And then we had similarly from universities from around the world. And ultimately, we also had the pediatricians and the Boston Children's Hospital, others who have been working with these difficulties. So we sort of went through like this over 2, and it was amazing. And it so flows on that we now move from that, where we had the children, the students and families were brought up there. We've now moved to this very important domain of the family and indeed the relationship within our families and the couples and indeed everyone in the family, the relationship, and how these challenges are being dealt with. And for that, we have today a very distinguished group of family therapists and couple therapists from around the world. Each of them are distinguished and have in their own world, they have in their own field, have developed and mastered such new interventions and techniques and so forth. And today I'm going to introduce all of them. But we also have four members in our panel who are representing the actual families. And we picked in such a way that we have two from and two who are family members with I'm not sure, I think from the housewives or so forth, and the other two again from professional point, juggling clinical work and home, the school work and relationship work and so forth. So we'll have all this, and we'll have this great we'll have this great program that will give us find new meaning in all what we're doing. Now, before I do that, I want to acknowledge we have a committee here who has been putting this and working together with us. And I'll just quickly acknowledge in this we have Dr. Stacy, who was here, Professor Stacy from Gallon from New Jersey in USA. We have Dr. Bambra, J.S. Bambra from Manchester. We have Baroness Ilora Finlay from UK, from the House of Lords. And then we have Gerard Fortwinkel from Hanover, Dr. Princey Palati, she should be here, and Dr. Animesh Jain, Dr. Bedi, and I think Jim James from USA. So all of them have contributed in one way or the other to bring this great, very successful series of webinars. And you'll see from what you're experiencing today how this goes. Now, I'm so aware of of the time, and we want to maximize this great opportunity of these very distinguished professionals from around the world we have assembled here. So in that, I'm going to, each of our panels have probably got 2 pages of a bio that I can, not from what they gave me, but right from looking at the institutions that they work with. And so, but I'm going to be very brief because I have discussed with Peter, Professor Peter Frankel, who is the co-convener, and in fact, it's serendipity that we both got met, and when Peter was attending one of some of our earlier webinars. Is that right, Peter? And yes. We put this together, which was, I think now in hindsight, was a great opening. So with this, I'm going to quickly, and forgive me if I do not pronounce your names perfectly, either from your German or from your Spanish, Latin American, whichever way, but we are in our heart, and that's the most important part of the whole thing. For me, of course, my introduction, I am Russell D'Souza. I am Professor Russell D'Souza. I am the head of the Asia Pacific division of the UNESCO chair, but I head the Department of Education. And of course, Australia is in the Asia Pacific region. So I am in Melbourne. I'm talking to you from Melbourne, Australia. And I'm a psychiatrist, a professor of organizational psychological medicine and dean of the International Institute of Organizational Psychological Medicine. Now, It's a great pleasure, Dr. Mary. I've already introduced. She's a professor of pathology, but also the coordinator of the what's it? The Mary, the
Fetal and perinatal pathology.
And again, I think it's important to note she's the winner of the Bill Gates and Bill and Melinda Gates, one of the awards, which is doing some excellent work on infant brains. So we have this Dr. Derek, Colonel Derek, Professor Derek D'Souza is a professor and a dental surgeon. And he's also part of the program. He heads the training and so forth in the training program with the UNESCO Chairs education program. Now, I think all of you know Professor Peter Frenkel, but for all the participants who are there, I think Peter is the co-convener today, and he is an associate professor of clinical psychology at the City College of the City University of New York. He was a former faculty member of the Ackman Institute of Family, where he has been doing work for a long time with families. And again, Peter's got such a large biodata, but all I could say that he's a winner of numerous awards from the American Family Therapy Academy, and he represents the American Academy of Family Therapy Academy here, being the past vice president. Is that right, Peter? So, and he's also got many awards, but also the author of many books. Some of the innovative contribution to family therapy in his work. Particularly importantly, he's done some work with incest and so forth, and won some awards for that. So that's Peter, and he's going to be talking to you. Then I have Professor Ia Asin. I just had the pleasure and
that's me.
Yes, and the pleasure to meet Ia. He's a child psychiatrist and is and a family therapist at the Anna Freud Center in London. And importantly, he's also a visiting professor at the University College in London. Then I have Professor Saliha Bawa. Can you? Yes, I'm very delighted, Saliha, to have you here. Saliha is Associate Professor of Marriage and Family Therapy at the Mercy College, USA, but she serves on the advisory board and an associate of the Teos Institute, and of course has numerous areas that she's involved in. But I also understand that you are originally from India. Is that right, Saliha? Trained at the Tata Center. Is that right? So welcome. I'm very delighted that you are here. And Professor Y. Young, where's Professor Y. Young? Can you put your hand up and wave out to everyone so that they see you? Professor Y. Young is very important. She is the president and clinical director of the Asian Academy of Family Therapy. She's the clinical director of the Ayeta Family Institute at Shanghai, and the honorary associate professor and founding director of the Hong Kong University's Family Institute, and the faculty member of the Minuchin Center for the Family in New York. So that's Professor Yu, who's going to be with us from Hong Kong, China, and China. She works in both places. Then we have Johan Switzer, where we can have you wave out to everyone. I'm delighted, Johan, to have you here with us. He's the Deputy Director or Director of the Medical Psychology Department at the University of Heidelberg, Germany. Is that right? And very glad and very happy to have you here. He's done some great work from what I can read from your the little. I had to translate, try to understand. It's all in German. Your university and your on the web page. So with the little I could pick up was that you've been doing some amazing work there. So we're very happy to have you Johan here. Welcome. Then we have Javier Vicencio, and Javier comes from Mexico City. Is that right, Javier? You're at Mexico City, but more importantly, you are the director of the Crisol Postgraduate Center for Family Therapy in Mexico City. But he's also, besides doing it, Javier is also a psychiatrist from the Royal College from UK. We have Dr. J.S. Bamra, who is also from UK, psychiatrist with the Royal College, who is part of our team. And then I will go on to Lucy Nijiru. Dr. Lucy, can you put your hand up so that people can recognize you? Where is Lucy? Yes. Can you hear me?
Muted. That's why you can't hear.
Yes, yes, I can hear you.
Yeah. Can you put your hand up so people can see you? Wave out. Dr. Lucy is the head of the Department of Psychotherapy and Psychology at the Amref International University at Nairobi in Kenya, and does work in family therapy and in that area. And so she represents the African region, and so she'll be joining us here. And then we go on to Bernice Wall. Where is Bernice Wall? Yes, that's Bernice Wall. And Bernice, you are from Hong Kong, right? And you're representing a family member. Is that right, Bernice?
Is muted.
I didn't get no. Yeah,
Oh,
can
I
you?
mute myself?
Yeah, Bernice, are you are you working or doing? Or are you at home?
No, I stopped working since I had the kids.
Yeah,
so
that's good. I wanted to make sure I was right, because you're representing
I am the housewife,
a
the
family member at
ex-worker.
home.
I used to be
Yes,
the
yes,
ex-worker.
yes, yes. And then we have Dr. Deepak Naik. Who is Dr. Deepak? Put your hand up. Dr. Deepak Naik is an associate professor of pathology at the MAHE, which is the Manipal Academy of Higher Education from India. And then I will go on to Gonzalo. Now, forgive me if I don't pronounce your surname. And Gonzalo, he's a very important and interesting professor at the Department of Counseling and School Psychology at the College of Education and Human Development at the University of Massachusetts in Boston. But I think importantly, Gonzalo, you also spent a lot of time in Chile. Is that right? In Chile. And so, and which part of Chile is that? Which part of Chile are you based?
I'm in Santiago. Actually, I've been quarantined for the last 4 months here. So I'm in Santiago, and I'm basically 24/7 doing COVID.
All right. So here we have. I'm delighted that you're from Boston, but you're going to give us because you're involved with San Diego. In fact, I was there maybe last year, a couple of times. Punta Arena, we were there in La Serena and all these places in Chile. So we have Gonzalo from there, who's going to be with us, and then we have Leanne Mendes, who's from is a clinical audiologist pediatric audiologist at the Monash Medical Center in Melbourne, which is one of the large teaching hospitals that is a COVID center for the South Melbourne in Australia. She will be a panelist for the family. And again, we've got two clinical professionals who will bring us an experience of juggling work and the family and the challenges that come with that. So with that, and then I have Diana Krisman. I see that I'm delighted to see you here and have you here. I understand you had some difficulty coming in, but I think Importantly, Diana, you are a family. She's a family therapist, but you're at the Agile Foundation. Is that right?
Right.
And Psychotherapy Center in Buenos Aires.
Yes.
Yes, and very big welcome to you, Diana. I'm a visiting professor at USAL. You know USAL University in Buenos Aires. USAL, yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes, I am a visiting professor. I used to come there quite often to the psychology department in USAL.
Yes.
Gabriel, what she was the
It's a
dean at that time. Yes.
very important
Yes.
institution yourself. Yes. And
Yes.
I represent the AIGLE Foundation, and I work in different universities.
Very
USAR
good.
also.
USAL also, yes. The dean, Reynolds, what's her name? She was the one when I got. I've been coming there for some time actually. Yeah. Very big welcome to you, Diana. A great welcome to you. And we look forward. We'll have two more. What about the girl from India? I saw a letter in. Is she there, Derek? Somewhere in Peter?
Yeah, she had come back. Again, I think maybe
let her,
she's having connected. Amrita is here. Just a minute.
Amrita Clemens. So we got
Amrita,
another.
can you hear us? Can you unmute yourself?
Can you hear us? Where are you? As soon as you talk, you'll come up here. Amrita is a family therapist from Mumbai. She's doing the work. She's a family therapist in Mumbai. Again, another one of the major COVID cities in India. Is that right, Dr. Mary? Mumbai is also having a big problem there. And so we have Amrita here, and of course that takes us. Is she still there, Derek? She's there, isn't she?
She is. I've sent her a message. Maybe there's a connectivity issue.
All right, we'll get to meet them as we come. One more person I want to introduce to you is Professor Des Cahill. He's there. I saw him. Des Cahill is a part of the Melbourne unit of the UNESCO Chair in Bioethics, and he's a professor at the RMIT, emeritus professor at RMIT. And Des Cahill writes the executive summary for all the webinar programs, and this will be the recording and the summary will be available on our web page with the Bioethicon web page, which will give you. So all the webinars you'll see there, the 13 with an executive summary. These executive summaries are prepared by Professor Des Cahill from RMIT. Yeah, that's Des. Des, you want to wave out to everyone?
Hi, everybody. It's great to be part of this global webinar on the family, which is central to my thinking and part of my PhD thesis decades ago.
Right. Very welcome, and thank you for your contributions, Des. Des is part of the Melbourne unit of the UNESCO Chair in Bioethics, and from the Royal Institute of Melbourne Institute of Technology University. Emeritus professor there. So with this now, I think I have completed, and the usual practice is that I have a little presentation and set the scene on why we are here. But I'm delighted and honored to give this to request Peter, Professor Peter Frenkel, who is the co-convener and who in many ways brought this together with me and Dr. Mary and and Derek. So Peter, can I invite you now to set the scene and bring this the beginning of two full programs, setting the scene for this great day.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Russell and Dr. Mary and Dr. Derek. It's been such a pleasure to work with you on this. And thank you so much for inviting me to co-convene this series of webinars. I'm so delighted that some of my closest colleagues from around the world, who I've known mostly for 20 years or more, agreed to be panelists. Thank you so much, all of you. I have so many stories about everyone. I would the entire day. And I'm also delighted to meet Lucy Njeru, from Nairobi, and I'm sure that you and I, Lucy, will develop a close colleagueship as well. I lived in Nairobi, as I told you in an email, for 2 years and taught there. So it's just a terrific group, and I'm sure all of you in attendance will find this webinar extremely informative, engaging, and useful in your work with individuals, couples, families, and communities. Whether you're a medical professional, a behavioral health professional, involved in social policy and health policy work, bioethics, economics, or in other efforts to help our countries and societies during this extremely challenging time. Somebody needs to mute, I should just say, because it's a little scratchy, or someone is still snoring from bedtime. The worldwide coronavirus, COVID-19, has had profound effects on all aspects of life around the world: physical health, the ability to travel locally or to more distant destinations, material and financial resources, and psychosocial well-being. Couples, families, and communities, and individual persons in those relationships have struggled to cope with fear of contracting the virus, managing the illness if it's contracted, or loss, and mourning when a loved one or even a neighbor or coworker dies. We are seeing increases in depression, anxiety, and trauma, and the rise of relational conflict in couples and families, including, very importantly, an associated worldwide dramatic increase in domestic violence. The Harris poll conducted for the American Psychological Association between April 24th and May 4th found that the average stress level of adults was 5.4. This was compared to 4.9 in 2019. But for parents with children under 18 years old, the average was 6.7 compared to non-parent adults' average of 5.5, with 46% of parents rating their stress levels being between 8 and 10 on a 10-point scale. Parents are often in conflict about how to manage each one's need for time to work at home while attending to children's online schooling, homework, recreational needs, the housework, and somehow make some time for intimate contact, never mind a little time for themselves to calm down. Kids and teens are stuck in the home, separated from face-to-face time with friends, often gravitating to even more time online than the pre-COVID average in the US of non-school online time of 7 hours and 22 minutes for teens. That's not for homework. And 4 hours and 44 minutes for tweens and younger school-age kids. In many cases, family members are separated from one another, and relationships with friends and neighbors can be fractured. As a therapist, much of my work is what I've called last chance couples, those in which one or both partners are seriously considering ending the relationship. You can only imagine the stress these couples are under, now being stuck together, trying valiantly to keep the peace for the sake of the children and their own equanimity. You know, as family therapists, theorists, researchers, community interventionists, and teachers of family systems, we view the nature of the individual's emotions, cognitions, and behavior, both healthy and unhealthy, as intertwined with their family relationships, and with the family relationships, the family's relationships with the larger systems of neighborhood, society, the medical, social service, educational, employment, and other institutions with which they interact, and with the natural environment. When teaching family systems theory, we often start by explaining and focusing on the more micro level of the person in the family and the nature of intimate relationships, with great attention to the relationship between partners and parents and children. We gradually, typically, introduce students to the larger concentric rings of influence on persons and the family. And I think if we're all honest here, I think most of my colleagues here today would acknowledge that we often give a bit less attention to the more outer rings, that is the macro level of larger systems, society, politics, economics, and the natural environment in particular. However, the COVID-19 pandemic has forced us to refocus on the broadest, most universal aspect of our lived ecology, the natural world itself, in the form of a deadly virus that has overtaken the globe and its impact on the more micro level of individuals and families. It's like we are now acutely aware of the air around us, wearing masks and keeping our distance from one another, so as not to share the air that moves from one face to another, one body to another. Whereas we usually take an inside to outside approach to conceptualizing people's well-being, we're now more centered on an outside to inside view. As I know some of the panelists will address today, we are also now acutely aware that we cannot talk in a general way about the impact of COVID and quarantine on families in general. We must ask the question, for which families is the impact greatest and why? And this question and the data that come from answering it reveals huge differences in impact based on race, ethnicity, citizenship status, social class and income, job status, position and stability in jobs, pre-existing health status, age, and other aspects of social location that afford either privilege, power, and protection, and decreased risk of exposure to the virus, and less disruption of life due to quarantine, or oppression, marginalization, relative powerlessness, and increased risk of exposure, contracting, and dying of the virus, and increased disruption of hardship due to quarantine, which has resulted for millions in massive unemployment, housing and food precariousness, inability to receive healthcare, and many other negative effects. And I'm wrapping up here, in an article that will appear probably next week in Family Process that I co-wrote with my colleague, Dr. Won-Young Cho of Lewis and Clark University, we suggest that the existential nature of the pandemic's challenges require more than just the usual psychosocial interventions. There are tons, at least in the US, tons of stuff we're seeing, that's all useful about work-life balance and couple communication and so forth and so on. But our proposal, and I'm interested to hear what my colleagues will say, is that people are now in a place of questioning what life is about and what is family, and how do we construct and reconstruct that, and how do we take care of ourselves? There's a broader set of questions that we have to help couples and families and communities to answer. So Won-Young and I had proposed a taxonomy of responses to foster coping and resilience, which we're calling reaching up, reaching down, reaching in and around. And reaching up includes access to spiritual, religious, and ethical values. Reaching down includes ideas and practices that foster a revised relationship with the earth and its resources. Reaching in represents a turn towards experiences available in the mind and in shared minds in relationships that provide pleasure, excitement, joy, and peace, given that their external sources of these emotions are of limited availability due to quarantine. And finally, reaching around involves reframing the mandate for social distancing as fostering social connection and support while maintaining physical distancing. So I hope that gives sort of a bit of a lay of the land, at least from my point of view. And I am excited to hear what my wonderful colleagues will be saying from all over the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. And we have already crossed 45 minutes now. So we will continue, the session will continue in 2 days to hopefully next Sunday. But I'd like to bring in first the family panelists, and we'd like to hear their stories before we start discussing the issues. So the first person I'd like to call in is Mrs. June Lee. Mrs. June? Yeah. Can you unmute yourself?
Yes. Okay.
Yes. June, thank you for joining us. And we would like to hear, you're from Hong Kong.
Yes.
And we'd like to hear about your, what are you facing regarding, the issues of quarantine and lockdown in your family and around, around your friends and all around you. So can you tell us exactly, or briefly rather, what is happening in Hong Kong?
Okay, sure. I think Hong Kong is a very unique situation in the world because during the COVID crisis, we have had experience with SARS, our government has, and most importantly, our medical system has had experience with SARS. So I feel like everything has been under control and quite well controlled. For example, everyone voluntarily wearing masks from very early on, I would think in January. And then the schools were closed down since February. So schools have been closed for 4 months, but recently have reopened. So for example, my son in international primary school has been back to school for a month with special hygiene measures in place, and then and is now on summer holidays. So I think in terms of Hong Kong, some of the challenges really would be space. So as you probably know, Hong Kong is a very dense city. So not everybody, not even the teachers themselves sometimes have space to really have a quiet space to conduct their class and for our kids to attend online classes. So for example, my kids are in the living room and I have 2 kids. And so sometimes they're both on Zoom at the same time. And you can imagine that causes, stress, that causes conflicts because we're so close to one another. And for a period of time, the adults in the house had to work from home as well. So they couldn't go to the office, I would say for about 2 weeks. So that added an extra layer of difficulty because then my husband had to stay at home and work, and he found that very difficult with young kids at home. And I think manpower is difficult because I'm actually a full-time mom, so I stay at home with my children. I was able to devote, 8 hours a day solely to overseeing my children's education online. And I know that that's a privilege that many people don't have. And I still found it difficult, even though I am an early childhood educator myself. So I can imagine that if I found it difficult, I'm sure it was much, much more difficult for people who are not trained as teachers. So I think there are some special challenges related to being in Hong Kong, such as space. And but in general too, there was a general feeling of uncertainty. So, our leaders, our government, nobody knew when this was going to end or if it was going to get better or how, if there was going to be a first wave, second wave. So the thing that we really had to learn was really being comfortable with uncertainty and learning how to deal with that on a mental level and how to handle that stress. So I think that was my experience personally in Hong Kong. And I know that it is already, I have a lot of advantages that maybe a lot of other people might not have in Hong Kong. So I definitely don't know if it's representative, but that's my experience so far.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, right. Thank you, June. Thank you very much. I'll go
You're
to
welcome.
thank you. I'll go to Dr. Deepak. Dr. Deepak is my colleague here in Manipal, and I called him especially because one of the things when everyone was complaining about COVID, he was one of the most positive persons that, when he became a stay-home dad and he thoroughly enjoyed it. And I want to discuss that too today. So Dr. Deepak's wife is an anesthetist. So they juggle between a pathologist and an anesthetist, juggling to look after a small child. So Dr. Deepak, tell us your experience and about what happened during COVID and issues that were raised in your family.
Hi everyone, thanks for the opportunity. As Dr. Mary said, I just took upon myself the onus that, we constantly complain that we don't spend quality time with our kids. And here comes a time at the far end of March, where, as India started getting those peaks and still is on the upswing. And these are typically summer holiday months, April and May. And I always used to crib, I don't get to spend quality time because we are constantly in the hospitals. My wife is in a branch, admittedly much busier than mine, and she has a longer hours. So I said, what better time to spend quality? You look at the positives on the other side of the coin, and which I did. Without sounding, going to nitty-gritties, a lot of things, I could spend my time, tell my child to fold his clothes, do his own stuff, help me with the cooking part. Even my wife, he assisted that happily. He thought, he's being very
Please tell them, please, Dr. Deepak, tell them how old is your son?
Oh, he's a toddler. He's going to turn 6 in September. So we are talking about somebody who is learning the ropes. I just wanted these part to be, a part of his usual life, even other ways, COVID notwithstanding. But what has happened certainly is all that has led me to be, closer to my son. The bond is certainly stronger. I'll say that from my experience. But my anxieties are related to schooling currently, because I think the policy certainly with the federal government are on shifting sands. Whatever is the correspondence from the school right now requires him to attend these and spend more screen time, which something me and my wife, both of us have been fighting against till last 5 years. We didn't want him to be on the screen for the longest hours. Wi-Fi was a no-no. Now we are being forced, to use the term, to use that. So that's another, that's fear is a strong word, but certainly a concern in our minds. Like Ms. June said before me, I think she articulated it very well. We don't see an end point here. We don't know how long this will go on. So there are anxieties. So these are some of the pressing issues. And as we come in, certainly there is more emphasis on hygiene. That's a positive. My son has learned to wash his hands. He'll sing a song and hum along for 20 seconds or so till he disinfects his hands and feet. He has learned to spell Corona and COVID-19. I don't know if it's a good or bad thing. He learns from the advertisements now what to do. So there's certainly awareness. He'll ask questions. But what I feel bad about is the physical part, the going outs, his meeting his friends, all of them are curtailed. Even the neighbors, for that matter, we needn't go to schooling. Even neighbors, meeting them, spending time in their homes, or friendly time. All of these have been greatly curtailed. So you need to explain to the child, a 5 and 6 year old, why this is happening, and they, like they always do. When will it get over? It's like driving in a bus. When is it going to end? When is it going to stop? Going to come? So we don't really have the answers. So we go with whatever the best information we can. Having said all this, I'll go back to what Dr. Mary said. We try to look at the positive part of it, try not to dwell too much on the negatives, because as it is, there's a lot of negativity around. So you want your child to be, on the positive end of it. Grandparent time is on the upswing. He gets to spend more time with the grandparents. Thankfully, they're around because work schedules are hectic. So he needs to be in somebody's care. And all these issues, I think, are tied up in that question which Dr. Mary asked. There are positives, there are a lot of negatives, but one does look at the positive side of it. So,
thank you, Dr. Deepak. Thank you very much. I'll go to Leanne. Leanne is from Australia, and she has 3 kids, and it's not, Deepak is lucky he has 1. Leanne has 3, and she's juggling work and children at school. Can you please unmute Leanne? Dr. Russell, I think you have mute. Yeah, right. Thank you.
Hi, how are you going?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Right. Leanne, you are juggling your work and children. And tell us what have you been, your experience during this COVID time?
Yeah, it's certainly been an interesting time. As you mentioned rightly, I have 3 kids ranging from 12 to 6, with the oldest starting high school this year, and Matthias, my middle one, who's 9, and the youngest, who's just turned 7 in grade 1. Little background about me: I'm working 3 days. My husband works full time. We're both very lucky that we both have stable jobs during this period. Of course, the demands of my husband's work went up extremely, and he had to revert to, as like everybody else, working from home. I'm a clinical audiologist. the nature of my work required me to be on site, so I couldn't work from home. And at the same time managing, the online schooling with the kids. I think the part that I found difficult, the oldest child was fairly independent. I just had to oversee what he was doing. The younger two were quite difficult in the sense that it wasn't just facilitating their learning online. The youngest, I actually had to spend a lot of teaching, which some ways was good because it highlighted what they were doing. It made the schooling system more transparent to the parents to see what they were learning, and gave me the opportunity to, play a big part and work with them. But not being at home to be able to teach them was also very difficult because it meant covering a lot of the online schooling on my days off. And to be honest, it was quite a struggle, and I thought I was getting burnt out. But I'm in a sort of unique position where my mum's a primary school teacher, and she was able to come in on the days that I was working and help out. So that was very beneficial.
Yeah, but Leanne, you also had some scares, right?
Yes, the hospital that I work at is one of the biggest public hospitals in Victoria. It is a major COVID site with a big ICU department. So there was a lot of, within the hospital itself, there was a lot of relocation, putting in place a lot of restrictions. There was, because I work as an audiologist, a lot of my work is pre and post-op assessments for elective surgeries. That was one of the first things that got stopped immediately, which meant our caseload had dropped quite a lot. So from a work perspective, there were concerns of redeployment, which didn't eventuate because I think in Melbourne, they had the COVID situation quite well under control. And we were back up to capacity after 6 weeks of complete suspension of, any of the patients coming to the hospital.
Yeah, but Leanne, were you worried your children would fall sick?
Yes, one of my children is an asthmatic, and so there were some concerns. However, they were at home, and we were very compliant with isolating and with hand hygiene. Generally, the community itself, everybody was very compliant, and I think the state as itself at the time of the isolation and with all the lockdowns, it appeared that everything was relatively under control with community transmission. So there were concerns that, if one of them does get sick, but it seemed to be okay.
But do you feel that you've taken much of the burden of, the stress on yourself? I mean, between, your husband and you, who has taken the most, in terms of stress and burden?
Yeah. So in terms of, the house chores, I probably took on more of the mundane tasks, which are, the cooking and the cleaning and that sort of thing. And obviously my husband was working full-time from home, and his demands went up quite a bit. Certainly he was living at work, as they say, at home. There were the start times of he was doing 12, he's still doing 12 to 14-hour days. And so I think, a fair bit of, I guess some of the chores were probably more on me, but having said that, I think we played to our strengths. He probably didn't do the traditional chores. He sort of looked after keeping all the computer side up, keeping all the digital needs up, having the home offices all set up for the kids, making sure the routers were in place and working, which doesn't seem important, but it was actually quite a big part. And we were all online consistently. for such extended periods of time.
So you've been coping well.
I think so. Yeah.
Well,
overall.
Right. Yes. Thank you, Leanne. We'll go to Bernice. Bernice is from Hong Kong. Can you please unmute, Bernice?
Yes.
Bernice, please unmute. Yeah.
The host, is this okay?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, so before, sorry, it said the host had to unmute me. Sorry. Yes.
Bernice, is your experience the same as June? A small place, all of you in one, family in one small space, and fighting for computers, and is that your experience, or is it? Is there something more?
We have similar, but also we are on an island, right? And I'm married to an Australian that loves the ocean a lot. So I think we've just become also more creative during this time because everything is closed. And for him, he needs to be outside. And, also like Dr. Nayak, right? Was that Deepak Nayak? Who's saying that, no, there's a lot of the downsides when you first start. And I share that with June too before, because we know each other from school. Our kids go to the same school. But the thing is, I feel like these weaknesses we had was a time for us to really be able to fortify and to be better. So I recognize how I needed to be able to communicate with my children better, how to speak to them, because, maybe in the beginning it was very reactionary. Do this, you don't, and therefore, and then the anger and the anxiety and frustration. But I think we got really used to it. And I really enjoyed having them at home with me, and we would see what we can do outside. So because of this time together, and my husband really needed to have some sort of an activity that's outside, we swam 4 kilometers with the children in open ocean water. And it really started with, and then the water's been so clean. The pollution stopped from China, and we had a few dolphins coming close to the coast.
So you've had very good experiences, and your bonding probably is much more intense now.
Yeah, I think because we were intentional, we really try hard. I'm sure my son still says there are moments, he tells everyone the most frustrating part was mommy screaming. And so, but I did try.
But moms have to scream. That's part of being moms.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bernice. Thank you very much. Now, what I'd like to do is, I'm going to put the question to the panelists, but contrary to Peter's, what Peter wants, I want to start with positives. And then we'll go on to the negative side, okay? Because we need to be positive at this stage. And I want to talk about something which, Professor Johan, yeah, I got it. Can you please unmute Professor Johan?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, did I pronounce it right?
Yeah, my first name is Jochen, yes.
Jochen, okay. Professor, you spoke about the connectedness. See, now we are seeing a different version of families, and you spoke about, has the connectedness between members of a family, have they increased? Has it strengthened, especially in families that are doing well? The reason why I'm asking you this is one of my colleagues did tell me that her husband, who's an orthopedician, never knew much about the second child. And this lockdown has brought both the father and daughter together. So this is open also to all the panelists. You can raise your hand if you need to contribute, and we will bring you in. So we'll start with Professor Johan. What are your thoughts on this connectedness that has been, kind of revisited in this COVID era?
Yes. Let me tell you a brief story. About a month before the lockdown, we had a huge argument in Heidelberg because there is a group that says we want to enable women to get back to the household. There's a very conservative tendency that is somewhat supported by right-wing parties. And when we found out that they would do a lecture in our department had decided to forbid it. Then we started to have a legal fight about this, but we were saved from the legal fight because Corona would bring everything down. And I had a dispute with these people about, they say it's not good in Germany that we bring our kids into childcare facilities outside of the family before they turn 3 years old. And all the women in our department have kids, some of them under 3, have them in public childcare. So we were very involved with that. Now, and I thought, and I do not know the answers because I don't think we have empirical information, but I thought that Corona, the COVID lockdown might have posed 3 chances, a 3-fold chance. The one would be families who say, okay, everybody's leaving in the morning, comes home late at night, nobody's cooking anymore, everybody eating outside. Now is the chance to spend time with each other. Second chance, it would have been a chance for men to become more central in everyday family life, in parenting, cooking, housework. And the third aspect, I know of many young adult people who in college would return during the lockdowns to their family of origin because there would simply be more space and sometimes a better computer WLAN. So I think there was a time in Germany in March and April and maybe May when families spent much more time together than they ever did. And my assumption is that if they have enough space and if they do not worry about school too much, which I think is the problem, this could have been a good time for bonding and connectedness. And my question is, did this happen? One of my assumptions is that the big mistake was that countries decided to let their schooling go on. I think what would have been a good idea to say, let's do three months of vacations. We are cooling everything down that is not needed at this moment, like hospitals or food distribution. Let's just make vacations. Let's not pay rents anymore. Let's not pay interest anymore. Let's just go into winter sleep like many animals in nature do. And then let's come out again after that. And we might have a better time. So we might have had a really good time in families. And I understand the big problem was the synchronicity of home office and homeschooling at the time. So I think it could have been a very good time. I think it has been a very good time. For me personally, I had a very good time. March, April were among the most calm and pleasant. I had so little to do and I could do it whenever I wanted from home office, so much less appointments, so much less traveling. It was a good time and I would have wished everybody would have had that good time. Maybe I just leave it with it.
Okay, what about the others on the panel? Anyone wants to contribute to this? Professor Johan says he had a good time. What is your, Professor Javier, what is your opinion on this? Family connectedness has increased, but what is your opinion on this? Professor Javier? Can you please unmute, Professor?
Okay. Well, you know, Mexico is a very crowded country, and we haven't been able to be outside of what is happening because we think that you wanted to know the best thing and what happened with families.
Yes.
Well, in fact, the connection we have is not as good as it could be in other countries because no everybody has a internet and everything like other countries, you know. Yes. So we had to get used to how to use these elements to get connected. And I have a granddaughter who is sending me messages through Messenger every day, you know, telling me how this drawing is called. And she mentioned many things, which I think is good because she's too busy with school online. I think it's a mistake to have, as Johan said, the school continues to follow a sort of routine because children are not prepared, I think, to be able to be online, and teachers as well, they are not. So they give them homework, and they have to be as if they were in a school every day, and they get tired. And
Yes.
I think that should have been stopped as well.
Yes.
On the
Yeah,
other hand,
I think that this is the same everywhere in the low socioeconomic countries, where you don't have the access to internet, and many people, generations living in one household.
yes, that is the other part. Houses in Mexico are not as big as in other places. Some people live in just one room, a family with 8 people, and
Yes.
to be there, it's quite a difficult time. And also, if they are doing online work, school work online, everybody there is too crowded, and it's very difficult. So much that when they live in that situation, they have to leave out, they have to go outside. All the isolation policies have not worked out very well in Mexico, which, I mean, it's a sort of partial close down rather than a big close down.
Yes.
So therefore, you can see people in the streets, many people, especially when about a couple of weeks ago, the government decided to say that we will decline, the curve was declined, and therefore people understood that they could go outside, And so we are expecting to have a new wave of people who have to go to hospital and medical care.
Okay.
That's very nice.
Okay, Professor Javier, thank you. I want to go to Professor Saliha. I want to talk to you about, are we now kind of redefining the concept of family life? What I see right now is that before it was education and work out of the house, and family in the house. But now it's kind of like an enmeshed, work, education, and family life all in one room. So are we looking into something like a change in the concept of family life? What is your opinion on that?
Thank you, Professor Matthew, for asking that question. For me, I think that's the question on the table. What is family life? We have to think, where did schooling and work come from? What was the origin of it? We are all going along, and especially in the industrial world, schooling was for creating workforce. And we have outsourced schooling, and schooling used to be actually a privilege before even the industrial world. So what is schooling today has to be reassessed.
Okay.
And if it is about citizenship, if it is about connectedness, our schools are not preparing kids for that. Work doesn't prepare us for that. So we are living in a world which is, and I think this is underscored by colonialism, racism as we see it here in the US, all forms of dominance, where we are all vying to have a better life. But what is better life? And I think that becomes central to what is family life. So Peter raised this issue of existentialism. I think what matters is what's being reassessed. And that's the issue of ethics, that we have been on autopilot. I love what Johan, you said about school should have shut down. We think schooling matters. And I'm a mother, I have a 15-year-old. He's like, we went for a walk yesterday and he said, so will you advocate for college? Because he knows, like, as an Indian, I come from education matters, right? And he's told me, I'm not going to go to college. I don't want the debts. I don't want all the restrictions of learning. I would rather travel the world, and I would rather go learn by myself. So I said to him yesterday, I am already having the conversation. He said, but will you force the issue? I say I don't have to force it, because the way you're thinking about college, which is why college matters, are the reasons why I think he's already in the conversation. He's already selecting, and that kind of thinking and learning is not what we are doing. We have become like a assembly line. Go to school, go to college, go into work. So what is family life? Family life becomes othered rather than centered. Relationships become othered rather than centered. So I think that's the envisioning that I'm hoping that we'll start questioning what matters. And what is family? Is family just a unit for production and reproduction and then launching? Or how might we envision family as, along with communities, as the building block for kind of, when we think about collective trauma that we're going through, it is the building block by which we become resilient. It's not just members coming and living together, but having the capacity to stay in connection, to be not just an economic unit or a unit that produces people, but actually a unit that builds up society. And these are concepts we already know, but we have kind of gone backwards, if that makes sense.
Yes, but Professor Saliha, probably in the Asian countries, they may not agree with you because education is the center. And even if the child doesn't want it, the parent wants it.
Absolutely, and I totally agree. I come from, my mom teaches and used to teach as a retired professor. My sister, who I see here, she's a professor. I'm a professor. Absolutely, education is central. And that's why I think we have to kind of reassess what it means, because the pressure of education, what is that pressure about? Why are we doing
because,
this?
Professor, if you were there when the children were speaking, we did have a round with the children. I'm not sure whether you were there.
I wasn't there. And
yeah,
what did
the
they
children
say?
spoke very beautifully, and they said one thing they've learned is they have become resilient. They have learned new things on their own, and so we suggested probably we should have every year a lockdown so that all of us will become resilient and all of us will learn, what our strengths are. Okay, so
I think that really gets to the point that I'm talking about, is to, if education is about coming together, if education is about how we create and innovate, then we are educating them. But if education is about subject matter, which is what sometimes happens, as an Indian, we all the Indians here know this joke very well. Are you going to become a lawyer? Are you going to become a doctor? Are you going to become an engineer? We don't value.
There are only 3 things in life.
Exactly.
Yes, that's true.
So that's
Yes.
what I'm talking about. What do we value and why do we value it? I think that's what family life is.
I think we all, for one, this COVID pandemic has made us rethink about a lot of issues.
Yeah.
It is not only a family, but even the worth of each one's life. And what is our purpose in life? I'm sure many of us are even thinking about it. But for most of us who are speaking, we are all at the, end where we can afford to talk. We are in a good place.
Exactly.
But that's where I want to bring in this. This pandemic has also brought out issues which are very, very difficult to hear when we hear about the psychosocial impact of this COVID. There are houses where people are living with a person with mental illness, or a person is going through domestic violence. Now, these are issues that we have to talk about. And I want to bring Professor Aya is there? Professor? Yeah.
Well, I'm just unmuting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Professor
Wait,
Aya?
She is not unmuted as yet. Can you I'm trying to that's it. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, yes. Okay.
Yes, Professor Aya, we're talking about issues which are troubling families. That is, issues of domestic violence, the issues of living with a person with a mental problem or even behavioral issues. This is a time where everything is aggravated. What is your experience in Germany? Because Germany also in many ways, it's also multicultural, if I'm not mistaken.
Mary, I was in London.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I is in London. Correct. I'm so sorry. I keep confused.
Don't
no,
worry.
But then,
I happen to be German.
Yeah, that's why I remembered he was German. All right.
But German 40 years ago.
Yes.
I've lived and worked in London for the last 45 years.
Yes.
And I've worked above all with what's often been termed the hard to reach families or multi-problem families. These are families, just as you mentioned, where more than one member has mental health issues, where there are many physical problems, perhaps, and disabilities as well in one or more family members, where there's educational failure, poverty, antisocial behavior, social exclusion. There are often significant migration and trauma histories. And these are the families that I work with and have worked with. And these are the families that I still have to look after, even in this crisis, when it's very difficult to reach them. So lockdown and quarantine makes it even more difficult to reach these families. I'm of course worried above all about the children in these families. And we know that in these families, from research just carried out in May here in London, that the pandemic has terrible effects on children, young people's mental health, and exacerbating worries, fears, anxieties, depression. There's post-traumatic stress. These children some children are more vulnerable to the mental health impacts of this pandemic because of pre-existing mental health issues, and similarly for some of the parents. And it's particularly what we notice here in London is children from minority ethnic groups are more likely to experience poor health outcomes, and therefore are more likely also to experience mental health difficulties during this pandemic. I would say is that coronavirus is amplifying the inequalities that are associated with the social determinants of mental and physical health. Very much what Peter Frankl said early on. So we know a very recent survey of 2,000 children here in London with already known mental health conditions. 83% said the coronavirus outbreak had made their mental health worse. So when you go away from perhaps the privileged people that the panel in some ways represents, on the ground, it's not as positive that family life has, changed for the positive. Particularly being locked up for here in London, it was our not very effective government. Domestic violence, I think Peter mentioned that already, has increased by 20%. I work a lot with family courts where children who've been physically abused. The applications to family courts has increased by 20 to 25%. Foster care, more and more children are being placed in foster care during this lockdown period. So in short, for those disadvantaged members of our society and families, it's a very, very tough time.
Yeah, Professor, I wanted to ask you, because someone had raised an issue during one of the previous webinars, that more than domestic, when you say domestic violence, there are issues now of children beating up their parents. Is that, have you heard of that in UK?
Well, you get family violence, and family violence has got many different components. One of them is domestic violence that usually is between parents and the children indirectly that get affected. But we also see children, and these are more often teenage children who can become quite violent to their parents. And yes, not only have I heard about it, I do see some of those families where there's an increase of violence from children, and serious violence in relation to their parents, or indeed grandparents who also often live in the homes.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Professor. I want to go to Lucy. Professor Lucy, are you there? Because we can't see you on screen. Is Professor Lucy there?
I'm just checking.
The issue of domestic violence that has now in Australia, we have got an increase.
Lucy?
So it looks like it's a global phenomena. Is that right? The domestic violence and what Dr. Mary spoke about, even teenage getting, we see that increase in Australia too.
Yeah. Okay. I'll go to Dinah, but you
Lucy
get
is
in
there.
Lucy.
She can hear us, I think. Lucy, can you hear us?
She was there.
No, no.
Okay. Dinah, yeah, Dinah, can you respond to this, Dinah? Can you unmute Dinah, please? Oh, there, Lucy is there. Lucy can't hear because you've muted her.
No, she can't.
Can you hear
she
us?
can hear us.
Yes, Lucy, can you hear us?
Yes, now I can hear you. You had muted me.
Not me, not me. The Dr. Derek. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, Lucy, the question of domestic violence, the telltale signs of domestic violence and domestic violence in Africa. Can you tell us something about it? Yeah.
Yes, in Africa and specifically in Kenya, there has been an increase in domestic violence. We have had several reports from the Kenya police, from non-governmental organizations that deal with the human rights matters. They have been reporting very high incidences of domestic violence. And in Kenya, it appears that many people do not seem to really recognize and acknowledge domestic violence. And some of the cases that have been reported have been reoccurring over and over again. This domestic violence has had a lot of impact on children, not only on the survivors of domestic violence, but also particularly on children. And it's important for us to note that when children are continuously exposed to domestic violence, they are likely to have some challenges in terms of their development, and more so their brain development. And also they are likely to have a lot of challenges, some negative challenges to their mental health, and they could exhibit, psychological and emotional as well as behavioral, disorders. Some of them, what is being reported by some research that is being conducted is that they are having high depression levels. Some of them also are exhibiting some suicidal tendencies.
Yes.
And a lot of, there have been reports that children and adolescents are committing suicide, and mainly because of, staying indoors and also witnessing domestic violence, what's going on amongst, in their families. Also, there have been reports that children are becoming lonely and withdrawn and isolating, themselves from their families. And also there have been a lot of reports on things like children experiencing anxiety. And this anxiety not only is presenting not because they are just, just because they are mainly staying in their house and they are not, they don't go to school. So that is the scenario in Kenya at the moment.
Because in India, we are seeing a lot of suicides among young people. And not only children, not only teenagers, but also, a little older, 21, 22, because of desperation and lack of hope. They don't see a hope in the future, and that is why a lot of them are committing suicide. So we are seeing a lot of those. And I want to know what Dinah, you're from Argentina. Thank you, Lucy. Dinah, you're from Argentina.
Yes, yes.
What is happening in Argentina? What are the issues that you all are facing there with regard to families and couples?
Yes, well, in Argentina, we live in a special situation because we are living the largest quarantine in the world.
Okay.
And this being different effects, different watermark. But my idea is to, in this webinar, to share with all of you some ideas which I'm trying to help my patients in this period for confinement. First of all, I want to mention that each couple, each family in this situation responds according to how relationships were before this confinement. So domestic violence increase if families before that live this situation. First idea, in order to help families, couples, that they can accept the situation. Accepting, in my thing, is not resigning, is to take real contact with what is being lived. Another idea that I think in this day is to search and try to find resources. We share with this, even if they are very small. Each resource, even if it is very, very small, helps to increase self-efficacy and self-esteem. Also, it may be an opportunity to discover with the family, with the couple, something that perhaps was asleep, hidden, frozen. It may be time to do what never took the time to do. Cooking, share different situations, and so on. Especially for couples and families with high levels of dysfunction, the most important thing for me is to help them that think that is a transitory situation. It is a critical situation. Therefore, this is not the time to make any change or make any important decisions.
Okay, that's very important, Diana, what you said, that this is a transitory situation and this is not the time to make important decisions. Because
yes.
Someone had, one of our panelists has said that, times are uncertain and we don't know what the end point is. So it's very essential for couples to know that, that they should, what exactly you were saying is do things that they never thought they could do before. Utilize the time for something good. And that is what I think Dr. Deepak also was saying. Use it for, be positive about it and make the best use of it. And that's very important. I think couples should take that, that this is only a temporary period and this too shall pass. Right. So let me go to Gonzalo. Gonzalo? Professor, are you there, Gonzalo? Can you please unmute?
There we go. I'm on mute now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're in Chile or you're in UK or you're where?
I'm in Chile right now. Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's from Boston, but now in quarantine in Chile.
Yeah, but
can
you speak for Chile or can you speak for Boston?
I'll speak for both. Actually, I just finished a report about Latinos in Massachusetts, and I want to reiterate that the reality for families is very different. Let me make two comments of things that I have heard that I think are interesting, so that I don't repeat myself. One thing that we need to, and thinking about also the existential things that Salia and Peter were reminding us, is for millions of people in the world, confinement and quarantine, it's their normal life. There are a lot of women.
You have to explain that, Professor
Yes,
Gonzalo.
that's what I'm going to explain. Yes.
Yeah.
For a lot of older people, disabled women and children, confinement is their everyday experience. They have to take care of things at home. They cannot go out because of violence. They are taking care of others. They never go on vacation. They never, walk more than maybe a block away from their home. So we got to be very, very careful that confinement comes to us now for those who we have the privilege of not being confined. And just want to challenge you all to think about that from an ethical perspective.
Professor Gonzalo,
we be very careful.
Professor Gonzalo, just one moment. I want to make a statement. One of the children in our group in the previous webinar said, I now appreciate how much freedom I had before the lockdown. And that is coming from a child. And that is very deep, that kind of thinking. Yeah. And that's exactly what you're saying, appreciating what we had, the freedom that we had.
Yeah, so that's the first thing. The second thing I want to suggest is that the virus and the pandemics are going to basically leave the world probably in the same place, although a little bit worse in terms, and that's what happens with disasters. They tend to remove all sort of assumptions where they happen, like this very slow disaster, but they tend not to change so many things. They tend to make things worse from a societal perspective. And that's the experience throughout history. We should remember history. We have faced this. So this idea that now we have a new form of enlightenment is an idealistic, sort of very privileged perspective. It doesn't, historically, that's not the case. And I know that this sounds very somber, but we really need to look at history. The third thing I want to say is that the inequality is so high that, and then I like the idea that we really need to rethink education and we should really lower expectations. Because I think that I was the other day in a seminar with the Minister of Spain, and we were talking about one of the largest consequences of the confinement has been a lot of stress in families. And because of that, continuous expectations from the system in terms of education, but also from the parents who think that they can control how kids use technology. And we need to give up that. We need to let it go. Just let the kid do whatever they want with technology. In this period, we cannot add new expectations. So that's the third lesson for me. And the fourth one, I think
Gonzalo, may I just add, you don't believe in supervised online supervision of
basically
online?
Right in a crisis period like this, that's not what I think is relevant. I think that it adds a new sort of tension for parents. It adds a new role.
Don't you think by leaving them and they're not supervised at this point can lead to other, more complicated matters? Because can we just let it go like that?
I think that we should all let go of a lot of expectations about doing things as if we were not in the largest disaster of the century. I mean, in terms of the global, and thinking globally. So we really need to, and I like Salia's conversation with her son around college, which some of us can have because we can send kids to college. That's not the experience of most of the world anyway. But I like it because in some way it challenges the notion of something that was coming before. I mean, we've been wondering, what are we doing in education? But I do think that internally, as psychotherapists, for instance, I think that we really need to give ourselves permission to not live normally in the context of this huge disruption. And this is going to be a long disruption. This is going to be another year. And I think that we are, again, using technology as this identified patient that we point out as the bad one. It really, for kids and for young people, and actually now for us, this is the way we can connect right now. this is the only way we can connect. And I think that we adults should use this as an opportunity to learn what are the kids doing when they're gaming? What are they doing when they're, doing TikTok or whatever? So rather than trying to figure out new norms about the use of technology, really we're going to have to reinvent norms. And in the same way, so I'm saying is just let it go of some of that idea that the technology is going to destroy the kids, rather than, okay, so what is that we're being challenged with?
Okay, Professor
so
Gonzalo,
it's a very existential piece, yeah.
I'm not sure whether, because Professor Saliha, you want to add something to what Professor Gonzalo said, right?
Yes, I want to build on it, because I think one thing that we're not unpacking is this is a very middle-class dialogue we're having right now. And I think Gonzalo is bringing that up, that is very privileged. And so our values that we speak from...
Saliha, just one moment, just to tell Professor Peter, we will take, because right now what Saliha says so true, we are talking about middle-class values. We will take up issues the next week on the less privileged, because their issues also have to be addressed. So I think, Saliha, do you want to add some more to this? Because
yes,
I need to bring in Amrita also.
Just very quickly, I think when Gonzalo is speaking about expectations, we have to own that these expectations are cultural and social, that we have embodied, and we as family makers continue to keep the societal process going and not be critical of it. And that's what it's raising for us. So we become the cops in the head for a system that continues to oppress and colonize, and we don't question it because it's what everybody does. And so connected to that is we have to unpack this idea of this is middle class and this is underprivileged. What's the relationship here? We need each other to create the classist society we have created. And so that's what's getting, for me, brought up to the surface, which is how did we come to a place in terms of what gets privileged by whom? And that's the ethics that we have to ask.
Right.
When we are responding. So,
okay, Dr. Peter, I'll give you the last word, because just one moment, I need to get in Amrita. Is she there? Because we have not got her in as yet. Is Amrita there?
Amrita is there. Amrita, if you can hear us. I had unmuted her, Amrita.
Okay, I think maybe she'll join in next week. All right. So is there? Okay. So we have only 15 minutes. Peter, I will give you the last word because I know you have quite a bit to say. Yeah.
Well,
so
I'd rather hear more from others. I just want to punctuate what Gonzalo and Aya and Salia have been saying, and just to remind you that that's how I sort of introduced us to this topic. We must think, I mean, you moved it, and it was fun, to how, the strengths of families are showing, and we ended up with a more middle to upper class point of view. But we have to ask the question, how is COVID, quarantine, and the sequelae, economic, political, and so forth, affecting which families? Because the majority of families in this world right now are suffering. That's one thing I would say. The other is the whole idea of, reaching, my concept of reaching up with one, to spiritual, ethical, religious. This actually, for me, came from thinking about persons who have been oppressed and in marginalized groups and how they maintain hope. And I started, while I was writing this article with Juan Young, I was reading Mandela, I was reading Martin Luther King, I was reading stuff from our indigenous persons, Native Americans. I got a ton of books that were really focused on persons who have represented and been in marginalized groups, and the power of spirituality, religion, hope, and so forth in hard times is enormous. I'll just finish. That I find with the families I'm working with across social class, race, and ethnicity, and I see families and couples across low to high, economic privilege and oppression privilege spectrum. This has been a very important factor, is to help for people to, because I guess what I'd say is, I teach very practical communication skills to couples and, work-family balance techniques and all that stuff. But without a sense of what life can be and how to treat each other from an ethical, spiritual point of view, to reach to larger values about kindness, about gentleness, about survival, and these are things that come from these sources, and they have always played a role in the worlds of marginalized persons. Sometimes much more than people with economic and material privilege who get their sustenance from things they can buy and things they can do and emptying their bucket list and the rest of it. When people don't have, they have to reach inside and above and around and so forth. And that's,
we will discuss this. We will discuss this, Professor Peter, in the next issue. I just want to, because we have just a few minutes left, and I want everyone's perspective now. How are we looking at future now of this, in terms of life? Do you think, are we positive about it? Can we tell our patients that or rather strengthen patients to look ahead and see a future? Professor Aya, what is your thoughts? The future of this?
Okay. I think what's important to remember is that a lot of people have lost jobs.
Okay.
Unemployment is huge. I think to create a false optimism when many families here in England, the United States, many other countries are extremely poor, have to be fed by food banks, and can't see that there is a future for the jobs that they maybe once had. And if jobs come up again because there is some lockdown, something is getting better, there's going to be hundreds of people applying for one job. So I think to give false hope to families and to parents is a mistake. On the other hand, to be over pessimistic is not helping, because we are there also as mental health professionals to instill hope.
What's happened?
When people keep saying
we're having some
coronavirus is over, the virus is invisible, so it could be anywhere or somewhere, but not here. Or we see it somewhere else. I feel that we have to help families to have a balanced view about where all this might go, rather than to instill false hope, and connect really with their hopelessness as well.
Yeah. Okay. My
Mary,
apologies.
just one moment.
I think
one moment.
Dr.
Sorry,
Arthur,
Mary.
Yeah.
I'll just say here, I think what Ia is saying, I'm beginning to think, you see, what Ia says is what is true, poverty or in much of the developed world. But and I see that we are all in this a little better off in Australia, but still the same. But when Dr. Mary is talking, I think and many others, probably Lucy and others, in the developing world, they're going to be worse, no doubt. But what we are seeing here is what they already are dealing with in the last years. So this is what I go to two places, and I think that's here people have not had that any experience of, as you said, 100 people for one job and so forth. So that's something to think about, and I totally agree that you can't give false hope, but certainly we have to find some way of instilling hope in life.
Okay,
Yeah,
no, my apologies. I think I have omitted Professor Wayung. We have not brought her in at all. I'm not seeing her at all on screen. I I hope, is she there, Derek? Because she was not there on the screen.
Yeah, I also noticed, I was looking for her. Did she fall off? I mean, did something go wrong with the net?
I'm here, but I cannot see you. I thought you had forgotten.
Oh, Professor Wai-Yung, we kind of couldn't see you. Please come into the conversation. Professor, your opinion, your thoughts on this, on families, conflicts in families during this lockdown. I'm so sorry, we couldn't see you on screen.
Can you see me now?
No, we cannot.
Maybe I close we open again.
I'm trying to open it, Derek. I'm trying to open your. That's why we
start video, Wai-Yung. You have to click.
I did.
You did?
We couldn't see. We were seeing you on the screen, but you're not there anymore. Okay, Professor, it's okay. As long as you can hear us, it's not really a problem. Please contribute to this. Your opinion on the lockdown and its effect on families.
Well, I've been so intrigued listening to you all.
You were so silent. We didn't even know you were there.
Well, I thought that if you don't call on me, I'm not supposed to reach you.
I'm so sorry. Yes.
And I think there's no way for me to reach you too through this program, isn't it?
Yeah. Please go ahead.
Sorry, Wai-Yung.
No, it's okay. I'm just thinking that you know what Peter was talking about is very interesting. That this is mainly a middle class value kind of discussion.
Yes.
And I guess since we are all middle class, you know, people, so that our perspective would always be middle class, and it's very difficult to speak from the point of people that you're not there. I actually, you know, I want to read you a message from a very frustrated wife, you know, from Japan, in her social network. She's saying that, quote, "My husband's loud voice, the sounding of him coughing and eking. The television is on loudly all day. My husband snoring as he lays on the middle of the living room. I put up with this for many days. How many more days will it last? How long can my spirit hold?" And this is a woman from Japan. I also want to call you a woman from Shanghai. She's saying, "I can't stand the family situation. As soon as the government officials reopen, I'm going to file for divorce."
All right, that's the reality. Okay.
Yeah, and interestingly, most of these grievances appear to be coming from women. We don't hear many from the men. I hear this one from a man, which I found quite interesting. He was saying that, he's saying that during a quarrel, whether it's with my boss or with my wife, I just apologize. I have been apologizing so much that now I don't even remember what I'm apologizing for. So I think, you know, this issue is a lot more complicated than the way.
Yes, it is.
Right, and I don't know. I think, you know, the whole pandemic has created a completely new context for us to view things, challenging our usual way of conceiving or perceiving family relationships. And I think if you look into details, I think Peter, you know, is right when we say every case is different. There are similarities universally. As I listen to you all, I can see many of my experiences in my families there. But I think there's also a lot of idiosyncratic things that each family is different. If we cannot look at those differences, maybe we will be missing on a lot of important things that the pandemic can teach us.
Yes, thank you, Professor. I mean, that is something that we will take forward in the next session.
Yes,
because like you said, we only talked about the middle class. There's more to this. We are not addressing issues, the real issues that are out there. So I hope next week, all of you come back in full force. And my apologies if I have not given some of you enough time. I thank all the family panelists. Their views were important to start or to set the stage for today's conversations. The difficulty of being a mother at home as well as a mother, and Dr. Deepak also father, working, how to balance. We all can afford to look positively because we are of, the well class and the middle class. But there are situations much more, which are much more deeper that we need to address. And I think we will do it the next session. And I hope all of you come back and we'll have a good conversation at that point next week. So thank you very much.
Dr. Mary, the next one, of course, now that we all know each other, except for we'll be having another panelist join us. Otherwise, all of us know each other, so we will not have too much of time in introducing and starting. So we will have the opportunity of about 120 or 130 minutes of taking all these what we've just picked up here. I think from what we've said, we've talked about the middle class and much about that. And I think what Peter brought up, there's a lot of, I think, Peter, you are dealing with a variety of socioeconomic, from my little discussion with you and from the last webinar where you brought in about families getting infected, the children being there, and even sometimes death and so forth. So that's a very, where a number of people are in New York living, having to live in one apartment and so forth. So that's another way, and I think Gonzalo brought that very, I think very eloquently, that what we're talking and what actually, I think all this makes us look at the complexities of, and I think it's great that we had, from different parts, from, each of us bringing in different domains and different areas, and how we look at, how we see this. I was looking at, Jochen, you were in Germany. I saw your question, you were talking about migrant. You brought this issue of migrant workers, is that right? Who have been affected, who are in the meat factories and so forth. Now that has to be different from many of the other groups in Germany. Is that right?
Yes. Yes, we have two big problem groups right now. We have very few new infections in Germany now, but we have most infections among big factories where huge amounts of meat are cut into pieces, and all the workers come from Romania usually. They are brought here for 3 months. They live in dwellings of 6 in a room, and they stand side by side. The meat comes from the right to the left, and they have, it's a very hard work at a very fast pace. And now there is a small town where 1,100 workers are infected, which has made now the whole district become a problem district. And it's very interesting now. People from this district are now not allowed to make their vacations elsewhere in Germany. So we built up frontiers within Germany, and all the people in this area are pissed off because they have to suffer with the migrant workers, although they do not work in the factories, which is a very interesting aspect of, you mean nobody cares as long as it is restricted to these Romanian workers, but as soon as somebody from the locals is not allowed to go into vacation to the Eastern Sea, it's a huge turmoil. That's a very interesting phenomenon.
I think, Dr. Mary, that's interesting. What I think what we bring out here, and I think we see this, as long as it doesn't affect us, it's quite all right the moment it is. And then you also the question that you're put along with that socioeconomic group. So you're classified, and that makes things worse. Is that right? Because your team, we have that same thing. So I think these are quite important aspects that have come out from all what we've seen. I'm glad, Professor Vayum, that we got to see you again.
Yes, finally.
All right. So, and I think Peter's other important area is the looking up and looking inside, Peter, where I think that looking for spiritual, I thought that was very important, that there are two ways of coping. So that's a coping strategy, isn't it? If we use money and buy things, that's one coping. And the other, when you don't have that, then the coping is to look at the spiritual up, inside, and what we say all around. Sometimes you might not get everything all around, and all you can get is from up above, right? So I think that has an important role here to think about bringing this whole area. So.
Well, let me just say, I think it was Bernice said, that you really got very intentional in your family. Like you thought about what can we do to make our lives better? And I think that intentionality is what I mean. That's one version of what I mean by looking up. Like you think about, like, what do we want to do? What do we value? Whether it's spiritual, religious, ethical, whatever. I'm not here preaching religion. And it's also the thing that I've noticed in my work with couples and families during this is you can teach them all the psycho techniques you want, communication skills, good solid CBT. You can do all the stuff we do as therapists, but if they're not engaging things like love, like compassion, like honesty, like gentleness, those larger values, they're not going to do those things, or they're not really, these techniques that we teach. It's this crisis has really taught me that without larger values to guide family life, all the techniques and the moves that we teach, they fall flat. They largely do. When they work, it's because families already have those feelings. But the high stress, last chance couples, divorcing families that I work with, it's a lot about what is the source of love and compassion. And from there, with that energy, they can start to mobilize our specific techniques. It's almost like when we talk about common factors, in therapy that drive the specific techniques, the whole integrative therapy language. It's the same thing here. So that's kind of what I was talking about. And Deanna's comments also, same idea, like, finding little things that you overlooked that you can do. I've been recommending people open a book of poetry or get a lump of clay and do clay or do origami together. But no one's going to do that unless the goal is connection, peace, understanding. And what Gonzalo said too, like instead of trying to, control people's kids' technology, instead maybe parents can why do you like Fortnite? Like play it with them, or what's interesting about those games that you do to learn more about why kids do it. There is a problem with porn with kids and all of that, but the majority of kids, I think, are not using that. They're playing games with their friends and they're connected.
I think, Peter, what you're saying is absolutely true. I totally agree. I thought before we finish, we usually sometimes bring in a participant. I have here, can I ask Father Rafael Tenard? He's someone from Indonesia. I thought, since you're talking about this, we'll give Father. Are you there? Are you there, Father?
There.
Yes,
You'll
he's
have to
there.
unmute.
I've unmuted him.
I think he
Father,
has to turn on his video also.
Father, you can, yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, I got Father Rafael Tenard used to be the rector of a university in Indonesia. He's in another country there. So I thought, Father, you might like to. You're one of the participants, and we do bring participants to give their thought. And we're all panelists here, so we thought since we are talking about this important aspect of compassion, love, looking up, the spiritual aspect, and you're from Indonesia, which is also having its difficulties. Have you anything to add to this?
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, I want to give thanks because this is a very great insight for us, especially me as a priest, as a former rector of a university, and now as a chair of the foundation who manage about 200 schools. And then what we are talking about tonight is very meaningful for us, especially when education itself cannot reach the objective of education because of the stressful experience by the students. We didn't think about it because what we think about is that how we finish the curriculum, no matter how difficult the parents and the student to understand and then to cope with the problem in the family. So this is very great insight for us here in Indonesia especially, because sometimes we do not consider the difficulties of the family, of the wife and husband, and then the stressful condition in house, because we just want to finish what is instructed us by the government. And we have to finish everything administratively. So I do agree that we reassess, as Professor Saliha mentioned about, we reassess the education, and then also we revisit all the priority of life, and we return to the values that connect us all, regardless the difference in race, in status, and everything. So I will tell my colleague here, yeah, because sometimes we don't, the difficulties in the family, we do not, as a management of education, we just focus on the content, on the curriculum, and then we don't consider about the difficulty in the family. So, for example, now I understand that continuing the education without considering about this, so we just, like put everything to the student that will be the burden of their life. And we should, I agree that we should focus on what is existential, what matter most of the student, of the children, for the future. Yeah. So that's what I can tell about this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We had an opportunity this time, Mary, to bring one of our participants in to give their. We usually do try to get a participant to, and I thought I have had some. Never met Father. I've never met him, although I have a program in Indonesia, in Surabaya, and so forth. So from that point, thank you very much. So we are probably a few minutes over our time. So let me again thank all of you. First, I want to thank the very distinguished panelists here who represent and come together, represent an important part of what we are doing, that is solidarity. I saw here from everyone, all of us having a shared vision. We all together are talking about how we deal with something that affecting all of us. And everything was, how do we come across on that side? What do we, how do we see it? What do we change? But it's sort of meaningful to all of us. And this is the important part of our program that we have been endeavoring over the last three, 4 months, bring solidarity, remembering that we are all in this together, right from Nairobi in Africa to your Chile, San Diego, and Mexico and Argentina and all of us here. We brought this wonderful group together, and I think that's a great thing, and I'm indeed very, very thankful, very honored first to have all of you here join this group. You become part of. You'll see many of the previous panelists are all come back and on this. They're all in the participating here, and so you will continue to be with us. And so I want to thank you. And,
we'll regroup. We'll regroup next week.
Next week. And I want to thank Peter for putting all this together. Dr. Mary, thank you for wonderful moderating in a very difficult, challenging situation. I took a little more time because, I want to get to know. Now everyone knows each other. We'll have a great, we don't need much introduction again, and we'll take off from where we started. Dr. Derek, do you want to say something on behalf to the panel, to the participants and others that you're monitoring with the chat?
Yes, on behalf of all the participants, a very sincere thank you that has come through very strongly, as well as the sharing of ideas, sharing of the feeling of solidarity. And I think a standout from all the panelists as well as the participants was the fact that it was so difficult to identify who was from where. So it didn't matter where your name or where your background, and you were from a different country, and the shared experiences were almost the same. In conclusion, of course, and a request to all the panelists, what came out towards the end was there are a lot of issues, especially from the vulnerable groups, especially from people who really need help. So if we could focus a little bit more on solutions, because we are aware of the problem. So Professor Peter and others, if we could come out with some practical solutions, I think that would help. And maybe since all of you all are very distinguished researchers, if I can ask you to share some of your publications in the chat box next week, I think that's a good way of getting people to understand and share from your experiences. So that is the general feedback that we got from the chat. And of course, thank you to each and every one of you. As always, it's been a wonderful and most intellectual discussion, may I say, and all of us as co-learners have left off much more informed than what we started a few hours before. So thank you once again.
I have to add here that Peter and all of us here, we do have this, we will be having a couple of papers. We have the Global Bioethics Inquiry, an index journal of the International Journal, which we'll be publishing, and we'll be inviting all of you. Peter is taking I have asked Peter to take the role of leading that. Is that right, Peter? For a publication on the summary, the ultimately coming up with this whole program. We did doing one with the schools and so forth, which Harold is leading, and so we will all be there, and so we'll be taking this on after the next one for a publication. So I'll invite all of you to contribute and to be part of this. The publication, which will also go further down in helping. And I think, thank you all. So once again, stay safe, stay well, and till we meet again next Sunday. All the very best to all of you, and to all our participants who are still there. There was 200 odd, and still 100 participants are still there after little more than 2 hours. It's now 2.25 hours. So I'm very sure that everyone's benefiting from this. So thank you all, and we'll re-meet again and take this further. Regroup again. So all the best to you. Stay safe. This is night in Australia, and to all of you who are starting the day in USA, in half the day over in United Kingdom, and in Germany, all of you there, and then of course evening in India. So good evening, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, and finally good night.